Hi, everybody. My name is Eddie DeYoung, Chris Obote, and this is Educate Your Vote. And today I'm really excited because I have a special guest that is going to be talking us through some of the ways that we can be civically engaged. So this podcast show is to really help you understand more about some of the elected positions, some of the policies that are being pushed through, people who are running for different positions and what those positions are, what those roles are, and how they relate to your everyday life. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our current Councilwoman, Tiffany Thomas for City of Houston. Thank you for joining us, Councilwoman. I'm excited to hear more from you and some of the things that you have to offer and to share. So I'm going to kick it off with a question, but I'm sure you want to go ahead and introduce some parts of you. She has so much education in just civic engagement in general. So if you would like to kind of tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do overall. I know you wear different hats, so you can go ahead and do that.
Sure. So thank you for the invitation, Diddy. I appreciate it. And I think I probably appreciate it a little bit more because you're from the area, one of the areas that I represent, Alice, better known as Southwest Alice, Texas.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
We have to shout out the neighborhood. That's first. So, a cat with 9 lives. Have worn many hats. I continue to wear many hats. It's probably most Black women do, right? So I don't think what I do is pretty abnormal. So from a political and civic engagement standpoint, I have had the honor of being elected to public office twice. And this is my second office that I'm serving in. But I have a longer standing history around just serving the community in various community-based organizations that really introduced me to why policy was important and the disparities we have throughout our city, and not just throughout our city, but our region, state, and throughout the U.S. And so that was really a training ground for me. And I encourage other people to get involved with community-based organizations because you have an opportunity to learn and to grow and to stretch yourself when no one's watching, right? And because I think at least for me, people romanticize public office because that's what you see. But when you are a publicly elected official, everybody's watching, right? So you don't necessarily get the graces and the compassion to make mistakes or to get it wrong publicly. But when you are serving in community-based organizations, you are standing on principles and values that are attached to an external brand, not necessarily your personal brand. So that's me. I still live in my neighborhood, and so I was elected in 2019. There were 7 people on the ballot in 2019 to represent District F. Made it to the runoff, had a double-digit lead, won through the runoff, and we were sworn in January. 3 months later, things got really crazy with the spread of coronavirus in our community. The first issue that kind of came up was the rodeo, and in that moment at the press conference, and if you go back and watch it, I was just standing there nodding my head, but at the same time I'm thinking, is this really happening? Like, right. Are we really shutting down the rodeo? Like, oh, wait a minute, this is real. Right. I'm supposed to go see Lizzo. What's going on? And so, like, that was literally what was in my mind because we had a council meeting that Wednesday morning. I got a text message from a friend who works for the Texans. He said, are y'all shutting down the rodeo? And I was like, no, I'm going to Lizzo on Friday. It's Black Heritage. I'm riding the wagon. What do you mean? And then we get this immediate, like, everybody meet at the Legacy Hall. The mayor's doing a special press conference about the rodeo. What? And so, city council is fast and furious. It moves really fast. And that probably was one of my first lessons in things moving really fast and getting a grasp of that. So definitely not the first year. So fast forward, it's 11 months into my term, year 1 out of 4. definitely not what I scripted, but who could script this type of stuff? So we have been responding to the needs of constituents from very basic city services in a pandemic, in a global pandemic, which has exacerbated much of our city resources, my staff's resources, my personal resources, just making sure that our people can do a few things, stay in their home, keep their jobs, and take care of their families.
Wow. So I will say that I remember that rodeo announcement, because I was also excited about that as well. Like, hey, we're gonna, the rodeo still it's a big deal, but it's not that big of a deal because they're not shutting the rodeo down. And then they shut the rodeo down. I was just like, oh my God, what's happening? Okay, this is a real this is a real thing.
It's happening.
Yeah. So I will say this. I was really excited when you won your seat, right? Because
thank you.
It's good to see, and this is something that like me and some of my peers have talked about. Like sometimes when people don't see somebody that represents them, sometimes it kind of feels as if it's like, my vote doesn't count. They're going to pick whoever they want to pick, et cetera, et cetera. So to see young people, millennials, to be in elected offices such as city council was refreshing, right? Because it shows people that yes, you too can be a city council person or an elected official, the case is. And I believe you and Councilmember Pollard are like the youngest people on city council currently right now, and our current city council has had the most women on council as well. So it's just like a lot of progressive moves, especially in Houston, to see such happening like that. And to be on the phone with you was an honor, because it shows that you're an example, right? And you're helping to pave those doors as well to other young people who want to be civically engaged, but they're like, I don't know, they feel intimidated. So I'm wearing your shirt. I'm really excited about that. So if y'all don't know, earlier this month, District F hosted their first ever youth conference, and it was virtual, and it was amazing because this is something that we're talking about, reality, right? And so it's not something that's like taboo or you can't reach it. This is one of the ways that you can get civically engaged as a young person. If you're in high school, if you're in middle school, these are some of the things that District F is doing to help engage people in the process and show them like, hey, we really want to hear your input and we want to work this process together with you, right? So my question to you is, because I keep saying city council, city council, city council, what exactly is city council, a city council member, and what is like their role? Like, what do they do?
So really good question, and thanks for participating in our youth conference. That in itself was, it just came, the way it came about to me was very holy. So city council, listen, I think depending on what the issue is, depends on the demand on the role. And so on paper and based on our city charter, we are fiduciary officers of the city, right? We respond, we represent our corridor in the city at City Hall. So when issues are of importance, resources from funding, making sure that our district receives the same type of public safety, economic development, infrastructure, revitalization, resources in our neighborhood that other neighborhoods have received historically. And I think to your point about being intimidated and getting involved, I think speaks to my experience, because I never left. So when I came back from college, I still lived in the neighborhood, and I never identified, and not just from a like identity politics, but I never identified with any of the past representatives that represented us, because I didn't hear them championing our issues. Right. And so, and as you know, particularly A-Leaf is so diverse. You have South Indian, Asian, Nigerian, Sierra Leone, you have Indian, Pakistan, Iranian, South Central America, that over here, it really doesn't matter what you look like, as long as, because we all come from the same neighborhood, but the issues of importance we must share. right? And I wasn't seeing that, and that was one of the drivers of why I ran. So city council, we, one of 16 in the horseshoe, and I represent 250,000 people. 250,000 people with a very limited staff and a very limited budget. But we make sure that in conversation with the mayor, that we get the capital improvement project, the highly anticipated A-Leaf Community Center that we did a groundbreaking for last week. We will be opening those doors in 2022. It's a 70,000 square foot facility that has taken 25 years to come to fruition in this community. And so
really excited
it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. So the A-Leaf Regional Library that's on Kirkwood will be moved on. It'll be on the second floor. It'll be a 2-story building. We'll have an indoor amphitheater. We'll have walking trails, gardens, green space, more parking. It's the city's first resilient building. So this is the first development in the city that incorporates all of the resiliency guidelines, hurricane, all of the green infrastructure, all of that building can withstand. And it is a long time coming. I am blessed to be able to shepherd this project through completion with Mayor Turner. And so those are some of the things that we do. But on a very basic level, city council is police, fire, water, trash, sidewalks, illegal dumping. Those are our primary responsibilities, because that's where some of the highest demand of requests from our constituents. And it's my belief and experience that we have been neglected so long that what I inherited, I was working at a deficit, because we were starting at a place that needed aggressive attention really quickly. Right. So my first six months, we initiated close to $250,000 in projects within 6 months, from sidewalks to speed bumps. Every project that was caught, that was on hold, that was never initiated, that I heard on the campaign trail, I initiated them within the first 6 weeks. But then we knocked it all out in the first 6 months. So most of those sidewalk projects, construction projects, we reconfigured the median on Bel Air and Boone in front of Hong Kong Mall and Lee's Sandwiches, because as you know, the block be hot, the traffic is insane, constant accidents. Hated Bel Air. Once we did that project, really opened up the lanes and so we can start changing the traffic patterns. And now we're working on Boone. That was a over $125,000 project. So that's what we did immediately. So some of the things at city council that we do, most people don't pay attention to. It's an assumption that the city should be doing it. But we actually impact your quality of life more than your president.
Right.
Or your state rep, you know? We have, that directly correlates to our work.
Wow. I mean, so you said a lot right there, right? So I'm gonna touch back on this A-Leaf Community Center because it's like personal.
Sure.
And my little brother, he used to, when he was younger, he was a part of the A-Leaf Little League team, or whatever the case is. And he used to play over at A-Leaf Community Center. And I would just look at the place and I just like, man, I just wish one day like it would get an upgrade, you know, like just something that would make it more inviting to come and, you know, hang out or just do different kind of sports or whatever the case is. So I am excited for all the different changes that's happening in the Southwest area, in A-Leaf area. I am really excited. And to your point, you were saying, you know, oftentimes a lot of people don't think about like quality of life, right? Like, why is it important? When you see the streets being repaved again, you think about like city council, because it costs money, right, to repave those streets or to put sidewalks where there were no sidewalks at all, or to create medians, just to make sure that like the flow of traffic looks better. You don't think about those things, and you see it and you're like, oh, okay, they added another another lane to this street? Okay, that's cool. I like that. I can get to work faster. I can get home faster. You don't take that kind of like ease, right, to your life to city council. So I'm glad that you were able to relate the two, because oftentimes we don't think about that. We're like, oh, okay, this is great. This is better. It's about time they did something. And you don't think about who was the person who initiated those projects to make sure that about time happens in real life. So I really commend that. I like that you were able to relate that to our everyday lives. So I think that's the part that's always missing, right? So as you talk about this, right, talk about the different projects and things like that, why is it important for us to, let me say, attend like our city council meetings or the committee meetings, or even speak up at some of the public, meetings and things like that? Why is it important for us to attend these things and to voice our opinions?
I think the simple answer is because you live here too, right? Like, it's your city too. It's your neighborhood too. And I think oftentimes for those, like, I don't identify as a politician. And I'm like, I don't even see myself that way. I just see myself as a representative of people at this period of time. So, but the whole narrative about politics, we have romanticized it so much, where we have made it unreachable, inaccessible to everyday people. And so I often think of growing up and my mom and dad. My mom and dad worked sometimes 2 jobs, depending on what they were trying to achieve financially and what, my brother and I needed. They weren't watching city council meetings. They were working.
Right.
And so, but they depended on, but they would watch the news. They would read the paper. They would have these discussions at the dinner table. They would vote consistently, but they depended on their representatives to share the information that was pertinent to their lives. And so I think we have to have a fine balance. Our responsibility in our own city, one. The second thing is the responsibility, it's a relationship, right? When one person is doing everything in the relationship, the other person feels like, I'm about to check out because I'm tired.
Right.
And the other person doesn't realize their own responsibility in making this relationship work. So, frankly, one of the reasons why I initiated these projects is because I live here too. I hate driving down Bel Air. I did until that construction project. I was like, I absolutely, because it was always an accident. It was always congested. I couldn't move around. That's not the case anymore. Many of the sidewalk projects and the street projects, because I drive these streets. I know how raggedy Dairy Ashford is. I drive it every day. I know how raggedy Richmond is. I drive it every day. Right. So when the mayor said I have a street project, I said, I know exactly the first 2 miles you start on. You're going to start on Richmond, okay? Because it's horrible. But I think that one, why? Yes, it's your city. But 2, you have to find yourself in it. And we have to, I know they put a lot of responsibility on schools. Schools need to teach civics, but I think the community should be more open about talking about civics. I'm surprised when people are like, well, you've given us so much information. And I'm like, but that shouldn't be a thing. This doesn't belong to me. Like, I'll tell you the move. What you want to know, I'll tell you. Right. It's on the agenda. And so I think we have to stop making information private and making it elite, where only a few get to have access to elected officials, the process. At city council, with a city period, there's a television, a municipal station, HTV. We broadcast committee meetings, we broadcast press conferences, and you can watch it on the TV station on 16 or Facebook. Social media has a expand our reach. And so even if you don't catch it live, you can always go back and watch it. And I actually go back on Facebook and watch the housing committee, so I can make sure that my notes are clear because I chair the committee. You know what I mean? And so I think we have to do a better job of presenting public-facing documents to the residents, but also we have to encourage residents to participate in the options we already have created. This system, now that we're in this virtual age, has really provided access to a lot of people because they're at home or they have, they're not necessarily at work every day. They could probably watch, a council meeting. Will they understand it? A totally different thing, right? So I think when we have these community meetings and when we have that, we can't just depend on the 55 and plus to show up. Because I will tell you, I typically don't have anyone less than 55 at my committee meetings. I don't.
So that kind of brings me to like a question that I have, right? And I think this is a question that a lot of, I would say either elected officials or people who are in outreach or engagement are trying to figure out how to address it, is how do we get like young people involved in that process, right? Because not everybody, let's just say for instance, like you have an average 26-year-old who has an apartment on the Southwest Side, somewhere in A-Leave. They don't have an HOA, they don't have a civic club, but they kind of, may have some issues about whatever thing is regarding where they live, right? And so they may call 311, and that's maybe to the extent of it. But how do we pull those kind of people into your meetings, like your committee meetings, or your whatever it is, community meetings? What are some ways that you think may work to pull somebody like that into engagement so that it's a balance between like our seniors and then our young people?
And so again, another easy, the simple answer is, like you were involved in the Urban League Young Professionals and probably still are. It was no different than recruiting for membership.
Right.
Like why do we, you see what I'm saying? So why do we place more value on, the civic engagement total process, and we make it different when it's like a city system versus when we are looking at increasing our membership with our alumni association, or when we're talking about recruitment for the Urban League or recruitment for, 100 Black men or XYZ. Why do we make it different? So I was first involved with the Urban League like at 25, 24, right? And so one, I was curious about some things. No one necessarily recruited me, but I've been recruited for plenty of things. So, we have to ask ourselves the question for those who do have the information, who have we invited to say, hey, have you watched that meeting? Or will you come with me to the super neighborhood meeting? Because again, if we don't see ourselves in it, we're not going to think that we belong. So, but the other thing is that, young people are busy working, paying student loans, possibly taking care of a parent, trying to, they may not be in a financial place where they have the type of time to do that. And so I think we have to give grace to that generation and those in those circumstances, because the way that the demand on their time is set up, our meetings may not be convenient. Right? The way that the time, because we think about 25, you might be working 2 jobs. You might be taking care of a young one. You might still be at home. And so I think it's unfair, and it's unfair because I can go back to when I was 25 and I worked 2 jobs. I remember when I got out of college, I worked 2 jobs. I did not buy a car. I rode the bus to work. I saved my money to pay off my credit card debt, and I bought me a car. And so I was not involved with the Urban League. I was not going to committee meetings. I was, trying to get my credit score up. I was trying to, participate in my own uplift. So I think we have to give grace to those people that are currently have demands on their time, which does not allow. Well, I think what our responsibility is to make sure that the information that we have, we go share that.
Right.
Right? We may share that because you don't know when they're going to say, hey, remember when you was telling me about such and such? Okay, I want to go, right? And I just remember plenty of times in my Urban League life, various committee chairs and officer roles, I would beg people to come to the Urban League, and it would take them, and then a year later, they'd be like, oh yeah, I signed up. After a year of me saying every second Tuesday, come, we gotta, get your dues half off, like a year later.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I think we, instead of sounding like beating our drum, what's the significant thing that they need to attend, right? Like, what's the thing that they need to accompany you with? Because just saying you need to go to that in a space where mama and daddy probably not talking about it, you weren't exposed to it growing up, so then we just supposed to put you at a candidate's forum and you supposed to grasp what the hell's going on? No. So how do we steward people into this, right? So I think that, you know, maybe the one ask is every candidate's forum, you bring 2 people. Maybe it's the candidate's forum, right? Because everyone can't make everything. But maybe it's that one thing that every year, hey, I think, you know, let's all just go. That's, you know, this is our neighborhood. We should all participate. Because if you become a sounding symbol, right? And then 48 Laws talks about, Law 16 talks about value, right? If you're everywhere all the time, you don't create value for yourself, right? You're like a light bulb, you always on. But if you retreat every once in a while, when people do see you, they're like, oh my God, it's you, right? And I think we should do the same thing with engaging the group that may not have the same time, and being really targeted with what we approach them with.
Wow.
So they find value in it.
Wow. I mean, so I appreciate the answer. And what I got from that is that we need to just pretty much change the culture, right, of how we engage the people, young people especially, too. How, like you said, extend that grace and be understanding, but also find something that's very specific and pointed to what they're going through, so that it's really like straight to the point. Hey, you need to be involved, or you kind of like you said, recruiting them to a meeting, recruiting them to come to and say, hey, this is why you need to be here, because this is about to go down and it's going to affect you directly, your kids, your mom, your dad, you, whoever. So I appreciate that that answer. So you mentioned before that you are the chair of the housing committee. So talk to me about what committees are there on city council, and exactly like how does that work? Like, what kind of committees are there? And then, like, how does that work in terms of how it relates to somebody like me, who is your average resident? I'm not, you know, just hypothetically, how does that relate to me?
Sure. So think of it in your regular organizational structure. You have your executive board, and then you have committees, and then you have general population, your general membership, right? So we are on the executive board, and we also chair committees, if that makes any sense. So the mayor appoints chair and vice chair of committees. We have so many. Hopefully, off the top of my head, on a Sunday, I can rip these off. So there's housing and community affairs. There's public safety and homeland security, regulatory neighborhood affairs, budget and fiscal affairs, quality of life, TTI, which is transportation, technology, and infrastructure, economic development, and I believe that's it.
Okay.
And ethics and the ethics committee, which is an ad hoc committee. So the committee work is where items that are possibly going to be considered for a vote in the future come up to be vetted. That's the opportunity for council members and the public to understand where the direction of the city is happening around certain issues. So I am chair of housing and community affairs, and under that is housing, homelessness, veteran affairs, and solid waste. And so I didn't want housing. But the mayor was like, girl, please.
I can't believe you didn't want housing. Like, I feel like
I didn't want housing.
It's like,
it is. That's why.
What? You're like the perfect person.
I didn't want it. I wanted quality of life.
Okay, I can see that.
I was like, oh, you know, I'll do something different. Like, I don't want to, you know, it's a heavy lift. And so, so because I'm chair of housing, I'm not vice chair of anything else, because I can't be, because housing's a monster. And so, So the committee meetings are open. Anyone can watch, similar to a council meeting. And I restructured the housing meetings because when I got into office, I was reviewing all of their past minutes from 2019, 2017, 2018. And I will tell you, it was dominated around disaster recovery. So after Houston had experienced, Ike, Tax Day flood, Memorial Weekend floods, Rita, all of that, that's what dominated the committee conversation. So all of our other housing pathways around single family home ownership, right? Multifamily development, Houston Land Bank, Land Trust, the Housing Authority. All of those pieces were never discussed openly. And so we didn't, the broader public and the council didn't have an opportunity to fully master, from what I gather, fully master the city's plan around housing, affordable housing at that. So at the conversation with the mayor, I had a couple of meetings in the same format, the previous format, and I was like, this is whack. So at the conversations with him, like, Mayor, we have got to restructure this committee to where we're talking about our disaster related, like things that are happening in terms of our recovery efforts, or we have to also start having rigorous conversation about affordable housing. And what I mean by affordable housing is that individuals under the 80% AMI, and AMI is area median income, that you're making $65,000. What affordable in terms of market rate in the state is $250,000. They're saying a house that's $250,000 is affordable when wages are not increasing. And you see what I'm saying? And so there's some things that the city has in place, and Mayor Turner he is in complete support of affordable housing and making sure that we have a variety of housing options that we can present to our community, because our community is different. They have different needs. Yeah. And so every month you hear about that. So what I did was, so now the department presents, but I also have like nonprofits that present to us. The Land Trust presented on last Tuesday. We also had some developers come and talk. So what we're trying to do is really mitigate the issues our developers, nonprofit partners, and the city is having around making sure that we can get these houses built up, that they're safe, secure, not in a flood area, and that they are affordable, and that people can stay in that home and feel safe and go to good schools, right? So it is, and so that was, but that ain't even with the pandemic. So we got all that going on. Then here comes COVID, here comes evictions. Woo! So which really
a lot on your plate, a lot. It's housing
a lot.
A beast, and so I give you kudos, because I'm not, I'm not saying nobody else could do it, but I know that you're the best person for this position.
Oh well, I appreciate that, because many days I'm sitting in the house like, what in the world is this? So that's just on a daily. So we had to immediately respond to the eviction, and I will tell you that there was a high demand once we did our first rent relief with Baker Ripley, the $15 million. That money was gone in 85 minutes. First come, first serve, it was gone. We had a high demand of rent relief out in the West. Our second program, we put around $20 million, $15 million for our CARES dollars. $5 million of that was raised privately, and $500,000 of that went to legal aid to provide legal representation to those experiencing the eviction process. So managing all of that while making sure that people's trash is getting picked up on time, which still sometimes does not happen. Making sure that speed bumps were put in place, projects were completed, and the very daily constituent services. So that's why I said when I was opening, like, what is city council? It really depends on what is going on at the time and the demand on what the demand people have on the city to do.
Listen, I give you all the kudos, and listen, I just want to tell people out there, like, you too can also be a city council person. She's showing us.
Yeah.
She's paving the way for young people to come through after her, and take it to the next level as well. So just kudos to Councilwoman Thomas. You mentioned something quickly about schools, and I want to make sure that I mention this, that you were previously elected to the Ailey School Board, right? Am I saying that? Ailey
Yes,
ISD School Board.
yes.
So
Ailey ISD from, yeah.
tell us like why that's significant, and like what exactly does that role even do? Like I know people may say, oh yeah, the school board, but for somebody who may not have children, they're like, I don't really know what that is. And for the parents that do have children, they're very much like, I should be involved, but I don't really know. Whatever the school says, that's what we're gonna do. So tell us like a little bit about what that process, like what is that role and why is it important?
So yeah, so I served from 2013 to 2017, and you know, again, the community asked me to run. I was serving on the superintendent. He had this community leadership board, and just as a proud alum of the, you know, of being a part of the Ailey schools, he wanted to change the narrative around the district. Because every time you heard something about Ailey ISD, it was like, oh, there was a shooting, or there was robbing, or something like that, or you know.
I know a lot about that when I got into college.
You're right.
So I know a lot about that. When I got into college, I wanted to go back to the games. I wanted to go back, and I was just like, I can't. I don't know if I can go back because I was having friends and friends of friends dying from shootings at ball games or whatever random thing was happening, and it was like I just couldn't safely go back to, you know, Ailey like that, even though I wanted to. So I definitely understand.
Sure, and that was the narrative that the news would pick up, and so he brought together a group of businesses that were in the area, former parents, retired teachers, alumni, and we started learning intimately about what was happening in the schools. And so it was one of a really meaningful experience for me, because that's when I realized that schools is everyone's responsibility. You often hear that around public safety. Like public safety is all of us. We all have to make sure that we're all safe. But schools it's everyone's responsibility, because schools can't do it alone. And we don't typically make the connection to schools to anything else. So, you know, when I got elected, my daddy said, your job is to make sure I don't pay no more taxes. I ain't got no kids in school, right? And it's like, yeah, daddy, we get that. And so, but many parents check out once their kids are gone, right? They don't really see the connection of their investment of their property taxes back into schools. So what in Ailey, we were really aggressive in communicating out. But again, it goes back to when you're serving a population where 80% of the students qualify for free and reduced lunch. Mm-hmm. Every family doesn't have the time to come to PTA meetings. And I will tell you, we really didn't have a strong PTA, PTO network. And so, you know, there's a lot of, oftentimes you'll dialogue around fault, about whose fault it is. It's all of our responsibility. So I served for 4 years. I had various roles from assistant secretary to vice chair. Very proud of the $350 million bond referendum in 2015, which provided additional capital improvements to many of our schools. Two most significant improvements was the creation of our career technology center, the CTE building right there for Old Richmond and Old Westheimer and Richmond across from West Houston Hospital. Mm-hmm. And the expansion of the Kerr Fine Arts building. So I think it was a demonstration of the district saying that we are serious about career and college readiness, whatever form that may take. So we need a building in order to support the imagination of our young people. Secondly, the expansion of the Kerr Fine Arts building also coupled the STEM investment by saying we also care and are serious about the creativity of our students, and we need to go ahead and invest in facilities that will support them. So I didn't run for re-election. People were like, what in the world are you doing? And I was just like, child, I did 4 years. We did good work. God bless. And then shortly after that, the community came back around and was like, hey, we need you to run for city council. And I was like, what? No. And so I will tell you that rarely did anyone show up to a school board meeting. Rarely did anyone show up to public comments. Rarely did you hear. And we passed some of the highest tax referendums, higher than the city. School boards run the highest taxes, right? Because we're investing that in our facilities. And so I think there's an assumption that schools got it, they'll take care of it, or the government's going to give it to them, but that's definitely not the case. And with my training in community development, at least for me, what I attempted to offer to that conversation around policy was to make the connection between schools and housing, schools and transit, schools and access. And if we don't have basic infrastructure investments in our neighborhoods, you cannot go and recruit young families to purchase their first home and send their kids to your public schools, when master plan communities in Cyprus are offering them a whole new world. You see what I'm saying? And so there's a reason why my parents moved here, and there's a reason why my classmates won't.
Ooh, that is a topic for another day. Because I can ask so many questions on that. But I really wanted us to touch on the school board, because I think often we hear about school board this, school board that. And, honestly, I'm gonna be honest, like there's a lot of people that's ignorant like me that didn't know that expansion of Kerr came from the school board like that. I just saw that they were doing some renovations or something. It looked like renovations on the high school building. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess the school is adding fine arts. And then you saw it and you're like, oh, okay, that's what's up, So you look at a whole new facility and you're like, what is that called? It's a technology. What? So it's I'm glad to have these kind of conversations, because it brings like knowledge, right, to some of the things that we see. Like we may not know how that happened, but just having you on and explaining that is really good for us. So I'm going to end this on a question that I have, right? Being that you're a millennial and you're in this position and you've been in several positions like you mentioned before, I would want one piece of advice that you would give a young person who maybe is looking to be civically engaged or may want to run for a position, or they just want to make sure that they be a community advocate, like my shirt says. What is one piece of advice that you would give that person? I mean, seeing that you, like you said, the community said, hey, we want you to represent us on the school board, or we want you to be representing us in city council. And sometimes, like I said before, it could be intimidating, right? Because you're a young person, you may not know everything, people may not have a confidence in you because you're not the senior level, etc. So what's one piece of advice that you would give that person?
So good question. A couple of pieces. One, start with where you are. But I think secondly, one of the reasons why I believe I was approached is because I had a body of work that the people were able to see for a period of time. So I think, in this very fast-tracked environment, we miss the essence and the miracle in learning. And if I could use a biblical example, David was called to be king, but David didn't know the kingly way until he was in the wild, in the wilderness. Mm-hmm. So there were some things and principles he had to learn quietly. David didn't just show up in with the slingshot. He had to fight with tigers and bears back there. That's not recorded, right? The things that's not documented, that people don't know. And so I think sometimes because we have the tendency to want to skip over that process of being in the dark, when no one knows your name, when you don't have a title. Be okay. And I will tell you, as someone who had more titles attached to them than a little bit, I remember and relish, and I hold dear the time where I was, serving in community organizations with peers, and I no longer was like the honorable. I value that time that I was able to sit at the feet of elders in this community and learn quietly. And hear and say, so by the time it was ready for me to even be approached, and I knew I was a leader, I had already accomplished things, but the time that they approached me is because they had saw how my character acts through every advancement. So I think we have to be wise and measured. I'm always really people really, when they're like, I'm running for senator and they have no body of work. To me, one of the highest callings is for people to choose you to represent them. That's not something you do. I don't believe that you can represent people until they ask you to. Like that's a relationship there. And so I think we have to encourage people to be comfortable and welcome the process when we are in the dark, when we are being prepared like Esther, when we are being held like her before we're presented to the king. And I think if we don't embrace that, if we're not willing to that, we will find ourselves in trouble and we will betray the very trust that we're attempting to secure. So I think that's one. I think that's the second piece. But don't be afraid to ask questions, right? My calendar is crazy, but every time I get an email from someone that says, I saw you at the mayor's press conference, or I looked you up, and I just really, want to talk to you, I'll say, okay. Because I remember when it was me. I remember when I was asking people questions. I remember when I didn't have, certain mentors. I remember that. And I remember when people tried to play me too, right? And so I remember that too. And now that my name is so called, right now they want to circle back around. And so, I hold fast to the belief that God will make your name great. You don't have to push that agenda. You stay focused on what that issue is. And if you don't know what your issue is, think of the one thing that pisses you off. And the one thing that pisses you off, that's your issue. That's what you follow. That's it. And then watch and see where that takes you, right? And so, people say, follow your passion. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. Follow what pisses you off. Let's see.
Well, man, y'all, this has been so rewarding, and just hearing so much from Councilwoman Thomas. But no, I really enjoyed the conversation, because part of this podcast is to take the elected officials, those positions, those policies, and make them like relatable, right, to our everyday lives. Right. And like you said, a lot of times it's politicians are like seen as celebrities, and like you're not able to touch them, or you're not able to get access to them, when in actuality, for you, right? They represent you, right? They control a lot of the things that affect your quality of life, like Councilwoman said. So I appreciate this conversation, and let us know, how can we get involved? Where can we find you? I know you have a newsletter, where can we subscribe, et cetera, et cetera. Let us know what the details are, Councilwoman.
Great. So again, thanks for the invitation. I really always, I welcome and appreciate these types of conversations. So one, you can follow me on Twitter. I have a Twitter at Tiffany, TIFFANYFOR A-Leaf, Tiffany for A-Leaf. Also on Facebook, Tiffany D. Thomas. And you can visit our council webpage, which has access to current and previous newsletter, upcoming events, updates on the housing committee. And it's District F, HoustonTX.gov. And so you can see that information, or you can just simply Google us and it'll take you right there as well. If you're interested in looking at council committees, you can just Google Houston City Council committees, and you'll see every committee, who chairs what, the dates they meet, and the time. And if you're interested in participating in public comments, you can always do that too. From the committee, and if you're interested in participating in public comments for the general council meeting, that's every Tuesday at 1:30. So, we want to make sure that government's fully accessible, because it's your government too.
Okay, well, y'all heard it. Make sure y'all subscribe to the newsletter. Go follow her on Twitter, like her on Facebook, all that good stuff. And y'all have direct access to her. Email them. Go to the Houston City Houston website and go find out more information about the committee meetings and things like that. Again, I appreciate you, Councilwoman, for being on here. This is Educate Your Vote. I'm Adidion E. Chris Obo, and I will see you next time.
Yes, thank you.